Early in my childhood, when I was about 6 or 7, I began to get the feeling that there was something different about me. Maybe it was the way people talked about me as if I weren't in the room. My family lived at 1 The Green, a tiny house in Ripley, Surrey, which opened directly onto the village green. It was part of what had once been almshouses and was divided into 4 rooms, 2 poky bedrooms upstairs and a small front room and kitchen downstairs. The toilet was outside in a corrugated iron shed at the bottom of the garden, and we had no bathtub, just a big zinc basin that hung on the back door. I don't remember ever using it. Twice a week my mum used to fill a smaller tin tub with water and sponge me down, and on Sunday afternoons I used to go and have a bath at my Auntie Audrey's, my dad's sister, who lived in the new flats on the main road. I lived with Mum and Dad, who slept in the main bedroom overlooking the green, and my brother, Adrian, who had a room at the back. I slept on a camp bed, sometimes with my parents, sometimes downstairs, depending on who was staying at the time. The house had no electricity, and the gas lamps made a constant hissing sound. It amazes me now to think that whole families lived in these little houses. My mum had 6 sisters: Nell, Elsie, Renee, Flossie, Kath, and Phyllis, and 2 brothers, Joe and Jack. On a Sunday it wasn't unusual for 2 or 3 of these families to show up, and they would pass the gossip and get up to date with what was happening with us and with them. In the smallness of this house, conversations were always being carried on in front of me as if I didn't exist, with whispers exchanged between the sisters. It was a house full of secrets, but bit, by carefully listening to these exchanges, I slowly began to put together a picture of what was going on, and to understand that the secrets were usually to do with me. One day I heard one of my aunties ask, "Have you heard from his mum?" And the truth dawned on me that when Uncle Adrian jokingly called me a little bastard, he was telling the truth. The full impact of this realization upon me was traumatic, because at the time I was born, in March 1945, in spite of the fact that it had become so common because of the large number of overseas soldiers and airmen passing through England, an enormous stigma was still attached to illegitimacy. Though this was true across the class divide, it was particularly so among working-class families, such as ours, who, living in a small village community, knew little of the luxury of privacy. Because of this, I became intensely confused about my position, and alongside my deep feelings of love for my family, there existed a suspicion that in a tiny place like Ripley, I might be an embarrassment to them that they always had to explain. The truth I eventually discovered was that Mum and Dad, Rose and Jack Clapp, were in fact my grandparents. Adrian was my uncle, and Rose's daughter Patricia, from an earlier marriage, was my real mother, and had given me the name Clapton. In the mid-1920s, Rose Mitchell, as she was then, had met and fallen in love with Reginald Cecil Clapton, known as Rex, the dashing and handsome Oxford-educated son of an Indian Army officer. They had married in February 1927, much against the wishes of his parents, who considered that Rex was marrying beneath him. The wedding took place a few weeks after Rose had given birth to their first child, my Uncle Adrian. They set up home in Woking, but sadly it was a short-lived marriage, as Rex died of consumption in 1932, 3 years after the birth of their second child, Patricia. Rose was heartbroken. She returned to Ripley, and it was 10 years before she was married again, after a long courtship on his part, to Jack Clapp, a master plasterer. They were married in 1942, and Jack, who as a child had badly injured his leg and therefore been exempt from call-up, found himself stepfather to Adrian and Patricia. In 1944, like many other towns in the south of England, Ripley found itself inundated with troops from the United States and Canada, and at some point Pat, age 15, enjoyed a brief affair with Edward Fryer, a Canadian airman stationed nearby. They had met at a dance where he was playing the piano in the band. He turned out to be married, so when she found out she was pregnant, she had to cope on her own. Rose and Jack protected her, and I was born secretly in the upstairs back bedroom of their house on March the 30th, 1945. As soon as it was practical, when I was in my 2nd year, Pat left Ripley, and my grandparents brought me up as their own child. I was named Eric, but Rick was what they all called me. Rose was petite, with dark hair and sharp, delicate features, with a characteristic pointed nose, the Mitchell nose, as it was known in the family, and which was inherited from her father, Jack Mitchell. Photographs of her as a young woman show her to have been very pretty, quite the beauty among her sisters. But at some point at the outset of the war, when she had just turned 30, she underwent surgery for a serious problem with her palate. During the operation there was a power cut that resulted in the surgery having to be abandoned, leaving her with a massive scar underneath her left cheekbone that gave the impression that a piece of her cheek had been hollowed out. This left her with a certain amount of self-consciousness. In his song, Not Dark Yet, Dylan wrote, "Behind every beautiful face there's been some kind of pain." Her suffering made her a very warm person with a deep compassion for other people's dilemmas. She was the focus of my life for much of my upbringing.